David, on Monday, Michael Jordan released a statement on The Undefeated where he pledged $1 million each to two organizations that he feels can help improve the relationships between police and the African-American community. Jordan was known throughout his entire playing career for not making political statements or sharing his opinions outside of basketball. But after yesterday's statement, many now have something to say about what MJ said.
I thought it was brilliant, and about time, that he stepped up, said what he said, because he's, at the end of the day, amongst us, he is our face. I mean, he's a African American, a very powerful African American. So for him to step up in the midst of these times right now, it was very big on his behalf, and not also just step up. It's not always about money and giving back, but for him to step up and put his money where his mouth at, I mean, the timing was perfect.
I almost stopped reading after that first paragraph. I was so infuriated by it. And you're like, wow, Bomani, what in that could have infuriated you? I'll tell you the part that infuriated me. Is where he says, I have been deeply troubled by the deaths of African Americans at the hands of law enforcement and angered by the cowardly and hateful targeting and killing of police officers. This is a trick that you'll find in media very often, which is the privileged class gets killed. The marginalized group just somehow dies, right? So with the police officers who were killed, they were killings. That's what Mike said. The cowardly and hateful targeting and killing of police officers. But these dudes who got shot by the cops, they just died, troubled by the deaths of African Americans. They got killed, Mike. Somebody shot them and they got killed. We have watched many videos of these people getting killed. They're not just dying on somebody else's watch.
Host of Highly Questionable and The Right Time with Bomani Jones, we welcome you to SportsCenter Coast to Coast. Bomani, why do you believe that Jordan released the statement?
I don't really have a great answer for that. I think it's fair to think that these issues are troubling him. I mean, he's a man who has children. I think that all those things are probably coming into play. And I did think it was also interesting that there was a tacit admission there that, that he had withheld these things before, because he says, I can stay silent no longer. I think that his reasons for doing this in the first place are pretty pure.
Okay, so his reasonings are pure. We would know that, but you took issue with the statement, as we heard there, and that was because you didn't like the way he addressed the killings of African Americans?
No, well, the problem that I have with his statement is that he's taking great care not to make anybody uncomfortable. And I am of the belief that it's impossible to have a productive conversation on these matters if your goal is to make everyone comfortable through the course of the conversation. Now, of course, it's hard to have a conversation with people who are uncomfortable because they tend to get up and walk away from it. But I don't think it's possible to tell the truth about a lot of these issues while always trying to make sure that the person on the other side of you doesn't get mad, right? And I think that's an unfair burden to place on people when they're expressing their grievances about issues like the things that we're talking about right now. So when Jordan says that those young men, I think they suffered deaths at the hands of law enforcement, it's almost like they just something happened, as opposed to somebody actually killing them. That is a care that is taken in rhetorically to make sure that the people who are indifferent to the fact that these people have been killed then don't wind up getting upset. And I don't think that you could be productive talking about these things, being so concerned with whether somebody gets their feathers ruffled.
Okay, so, we heard Carmelo Anthony say that he thought it was great that MJ finally spoke up and said something. He said it was perfect timing and all these other accolades. Let me talk to you about the statement coming from MJ, just purely the statement. Do you think that it will have an impact because it came from Michael Jordan?
No, I don't. I think it's interesting that it came from Michael Jordan, and I think that most of our discussion about the statement has been simply the fact that Michael Jordan made a statement in the first place. But I also think part of the reason for that is, while what he said was very nice, it's not like it was furthering some new ideas that nobody had thought of, or it was making, a grand stand in one direction or another. I don't feel like that was a statement that can have impact because I don't think there's anything impactful there. The idea that Michael Jordan did it in the first place is perhaps the most impactful part, but I have yet to hear anybody say that they read that letter that Jordan wrote and were like, you know what? I now see things differently and want to do something. I mean, if you've met those people, I mean, you can feel free to direct them to me, but I don't get the feeling that that's going to be how this ends.
You say that, in short, in order for things to really happen, a true dialogue has to happen where we are comfortable with being uncomfortable. Not that you are Michael Jordan, but what could that be? What could he have done differently in that statement, in his earnest and pure ways, pure motives to want to help the community and help the relationships between African Americans and police?
Well, I think there are a couple of things that he could have done. One thing, he used a term in the letter. I think racial tension was the way that he did this. And racial tension is something that's used all the time. And I have a problem with that because racial tension is just basically put forth as though the problem is that people just don't get along and just look uptight with each other. There's this big macro level issue called racism, and that's the problem. The tensions, as you want to call them, are perhaps an offshoot of that. But the issue is racism. And so much of this discussion tries to avoid using that term because that term makes some people really, really, really uncomfortable. But you can't get anywhere until you start there. The problem is, if you start with using the term racism, it doesn't allow you to do this in such a way where we're like, well, we're going to say what everybody is doing wrong, because racism by definition is pretty one-directional. But that is this common thing that brings us to where we are in this discussion, and you have to mention that point. And Mike fell into line with a lot of people who make the same mistake, which is we're just going to talk about it as being a racial divide, like it just happened somehow. And we can read books. That's not how it works.
Well, moving forward, and we talk about what Carmelo Anthony did with the town hall, and he was able to get some of his USA basketball members there with him, male and female. It was a good discussion in the community. And Carmelo, he praised the officers for coming to this discussion, this town hall, because they heard, according to him, how the community felt about him. Do you think those type of conversations are a positive beginning, something that starts that uncomfortable dialogue that people have to get comfortable with?
Well, at least that sounds like there was listening going on from both directions. And if that's the case, then yes, something like that can be productive. Like that can be a thing. But I think that we have to ask ourselves whether or not the things, if we're trying to boil everything that we're talking about down to relationships, if we're like ultimately missing the point, because relationships are part of it. But I think that these things are being broached as though what we need is for people to start talking to each other, and then everybody will like each other, and then everybody will be friends, and then you won't have these problems. Like, I don't feel like you should have to be friends with the police to not be shot by the police. And I don't feel like if you are a police officer, you need to be friends with everybody in the neighborhood to not have somebody shoot you. So I think the relationship stuff is really good for narratives, and I think it'll help some people in their day-to-day, like micro-level stuff. But I don't know how much that stuff's going to change the issues that we're really talking about. I think they're a little bigger than things we could just get in the room and discuss.
All right, Bomani Jones, co-host of Highly Questionable. Thank you for your time here joining us on SportsCenter Coast to Coast.